Well, here we are again. Looks like the last time I beat the dead horse was, let's see. Oh yeah, December 5th of last year. Oh, how time flies. Well, it should go without saying that I've always got to come back and dip my fingers into the saucy pit of Christery, you know? There's some reason I have to keep doing that, and I feel like the comments are certainly going to remind me. But don't worry, there's still plenty more content on the way, and those of you that enjoy the Chris Chan stuff will be happy to know that a more focused commentary video on the impact of Blue Spike is coming. But until then, why don't we jump feet first into the grand delusions of the internet's favorite punching bag? We'll be reading through a handful of articles today, starting with Chris's imaginary family. So, without further ado, let's get right into this. Chris has numerous imaginary family members that exist only in C197. While Chris has put some real-life counterparts into his imaginary world, this article covers those who have been made up entirely by Chris. This page will not cover Sonichu or the chaotic combo since they already have their own pages, and while Sonichu does refer to Chris as father or mama, this is more along the lines of Chris being his benevolent creator rather than an actual family. Like most, if not all of Chris's original characters, pretty much all of them exist purely to worship him or give him extra powers in the comic. And here's a pretty good family photo of the Chandler clan. You've got Chris, Barb, Bob, all of the chaotic combos, Sonichu, that crap, and there's even a custom transformer. You just can't do better than this. Cherokee clan leader. The leader of the Cherokian clan is a fictitious ancestor of Chris, originating from Chris's belief that he is part Cherokee, which was later proven to be true on the 16th of January 2025 by Quickie editor Silria2. The character is a Caucasian Aryan man wearing a Roman chestplate Halloween costume, showing how little Chris knew about the people he supposedly descended from. The character looks identical to Chris, who is meant to be his reincarnation. He first makes an appearance in episode 7 of Sonichu number 2, introducing himself as Chris's ancestor, tells him to kill Count Graduan, and gives him his Sonichu powers. What are you talking about? That's clearly a Native American. I know my history. I paid attention in public schooling. This article is just dead wrong. Patti Chan. Patti Chandler, born on the 17th of March 1988 and died June 27, 2006, was Chris's childhood dog, a Beagle Spitz mix who was put down in 2006, then brought back as a character in Quickville. Patti grew up with Chris and was the closest thing he had to his sibling, since his half-brother wanted nothing to do with his family. In a phone call with Clyde Cash, Chris compares the death of Clyde's brother to the death of Patti, offending Clyde. Chris defended this by stating that Patti was like a sibling. Chris brought Patti back to life in Sonichu 6 as Patti Chan, a character created by Megan Schroeder to help Chris cope with the loss of his beloved pet, where she somehow gained the ability to walk, talk, and apply for welfare in Quickville. And don't worry, she's got her own page and we'll be looking at that shortly. Sonichus and Rosechus. Being Sonichu's creator, Chris is established as a fatherly figure towards Sonichu and even has his creation call him father in the comics, despite there being no relation between the two nor an origin story for how they met. In real life, whenever Chris is possessed by Sonichu, he refers to himself as Mama, and when redrawing the cover art for Sonichu 0 HD, he made Sonichu call him Mother to match his current female pronouns. Unfortunately, this relationship would become much more disturbing later down the line, with Chris performing several sexual acts on him due to the influence of the trolls, most notably the Idea Guys. Russell and Cynthia. Back in human form, she extracted some of her essence, then in Sonichu form, she shot her essence up herself. After that, when she tried to transform back to human, she could not. She was stuck in her Chris Chan Sonichu form. Then between Magi Chan and the examinations at the hospital, she was knocked up for sure. Chris, on the beautiful act of conception. You know, I don't think it actually works that way, but I guess I'll shut up. Russell Sony and Cynthia Rosie are Chris's fictional Sony and Rosie children. After Chris's Sonichu form became female to correspond with his newfound female identity, he got the notion to use his own semen to impregnate himself, thus conceiving Russell and Cynthia. Miraculously, neither of the twins emerge as hideous mutants, and Chris proudly insists that they're completely autism-free. This little experiment behind him, Chris shoved them off to Heather Iglesias, claiming to visit them every now and again. They are first seen in Sonichu number 12, attending the Quickville Pride Festival with their lesbian nanny. On catching the sight of Chris, they immediately run up and cling to him, telling him they miss him. Chris gives them a dismissive "aww" before coldly allowing Heather to take them away. Chris described the conception again in 2020, quote, "She did the thing from between her old cock and moving the spunk into her vag, and had to stay stuck in Sonichu form until Russell and Cynthia were born for a few weeks. After that, she went back to her human form, and she had to go through the similar quick process that Roberta went through, but the estrogen was coming in quicker with C-Chan, since her alt form was now female." Reginald Chandler. Alternatively, if I have a boy as well, I would name him Reginald. That is not a dream thing though. I've had a past internet gal pal who would have likely become my girlfriend after she got here from her native land of Australia after finishing college there with a teacher degree. We roleplayed a family day with the children, and she chose the name of Reginald for the boy child, Chris. Reginald Chandler is Chris's imaginary son and brother to the fictitious daughter, Crystal. He pees on the ceiling. He is briefly mentioned in chats with Panda. His origins seem to begin with Panda Halo, and her discussions with Chris about the married life they will have in the future. As for Chris, a single date will inevitably lead to a long and happy marriage. Although Reginald has been mentioned several times in conversation, he is nothing in comparison to his younger sister in Chris's eyes. Reginald has no persona in the comics, except possibly Reginald Sneasel, and has never appeared to Chris in a dream. Since the untimely death of Panda Halo, Reginald has not been mentioned outside of direct questioning and a recent video, although it is likely that Chris would still name his hypothetical firstborn son Reginald all the same. Reginald was featured in the Playing House video, where Chris pretends Jackie is the mother of his children. This time he was depicted as the younger brother to Crystal. While Crystal can write in a diary despite being in preschool, Reginald was mitigated to speaking only in baby babble. The only interaction Chris has with him is complaining about cleaning up the mess he made in the bathroom, changing his diaper, and mentioning that he threw up several times during dinner, never stopping to wipe him off, and demanding that he stay quiet at night so he can fuck his wife in peace. It's interesting to note that Chris mentions that Reginald sits in a booster seat, not a high chair. While it's likely that Chris doesn't know the difference, it also implies that Reginald is big enough to be a toddler. Being a toddler that can only speak in gibberish suggests that he inherited a lot from his father. In April 2019, future message from Crystal Weston Chandler was uploaded to YouTube, purporting to depict a visit from a time-traveling Reginald.
There is one other, Crystal, and I am her brother. There is much you don't know unless I show, but that is a no-go. Right now I am here solo, but soon I will have my shadow, a lovely combo. There will be no tiptoe around the tempo. I must let go of my manifesto and go back to the golden, globe Babylonian weeping willow, below the Jim Crow plateau. I hope I have walked this difficult tightrope well, under your light microscope. Nonetheless, God bless. Thanks for working with me in this process. More or less, it's still a work in progress. I hope to bring happiness for all parties, and please don't sniff those gnarly Sharpies.
Could Chris actually have a child? Maybe. Although it would probably require a fair bit of luck and there were a possible chance that Chris could conceive a child, they might end up autistic or intellectually disabled if the child isn't neurotypical. Prior to becoming transgender, Chris's chances of conceiving his God-given daughter were extremely slim, but not impossible. It was at least possible for him to impregnate a woman, however unlikely that would have been owing to obesity's effect on fertility and rather more pressingly actually finding a willing female. However, once Chris began using HRT in sessions, Chris destroyed what fertility he once possessed, rendering the odds of actually conceiving a child at near 0%. While he is on the medication, we can't be quite sure if he is taking it regularly or in the right amounts. In November 2014, after being rejected by a sperm bank, he went as far as asking a friend to be the vessel which will allow Crystal to enter our world. But as addressed, he is no longer producing potent sperm. A later video showcased that he has difficulty getting an erection in spite of masturbating for 3 straight minutes, which just adds to his list of problems. In Chris's defense, however, he had just pissed all over the floor, and such an event usually makes it a bit harder to get it up. And he was under distress due to the manipulation of the idea guys, who convinced him that they would only stop torturing his imaginary wife if he made the sex tape. That being said, some later text-based details of ambiguous authenticity during Chris's soul bonding with his mother in 2021 suggest that he used his penis to have sex with Barb. Although Barb was long since infertile at that point, Chris allegedly wore a condom anyway. It's probably for the better though, as the last thing we need in this world are Barb and Chris having zombie children. In September 2020, Chris explained that he still has interest in getting a sexual reassignment operation in hopes of being able to give birth, although he seemingly dropped the idea in the following years, wishing to remain with his genitals for some unknown reason. Those who undergo male-to-female sexual reassignment surgery are incapable of carrying children. Although some scientists are looking into the possibility of transplanting uteruses into transgender women, Chris would likely be too old or too unhealthy to bear children in the event of such a breakthrough. And that's all presuming he could save up enough to pay for that in the first place, which seems like wishful thinking, considering that money seems to be the only thing that Chris can't hoard and he prefers buying Transformers anyway. In short, Chris will most likely die childless. As long as he avoids sinking his finances to the point of foreclosure, the toys that Chris claimed to hoard for his future children will go to the state of Virginia if there is no will, and none of his other family members step in. Should Chris actually have a child? If you are genuinely asking this question, then you really don't know anything about Chris. Parenting is an enormous task that takes huge amounts of effort and competence to pull off correctly. As with Chris himself, even if you have two of the most loving parents imaginable, an unhealthy mix of stupidity, coddling, and manipulation can easily turn any child into a monster. First and foremost, Chris is extremely negligent, which is a trait he picked up from his own parents. Name a thing in his life that he was tasked with taking care of, and you will quickly find that he has left them to rot and rust away. Even with things he cares about, he doesn't take particularly good care of and regularly leaves to break because he can't be bothered to actually take care of anything. Children need attention and care, especially during their younger years when they simply cannot take care of themselves. For example, can Chris successfully potty train a child when he could not do the same with his dogs or even himself? Obviously not. This is exacerbated by the fact that paradoxically, despite Chris's obsessive desire to be a parent, he has no actual interest in parenting. In the comics where he is both mother and father to Russell and Cynthia, he has Heather Iglesias take care of them in lieu of showing them any attention himself, with the two children showing obvious signs of parental abandonment. In playing house, Chris also makes it rather obvious that he actually intends to neglect his children, with Reginald being allowed to wallow in his own filth and vomit, while having not been taught to speak, while Crystal is expected to take care of herself despite being 4 years old. Children also cost money, and lots of it. Unfortunately for Chris, Virginia is among the top 10 most expensive states to raise a child in, around 8th place at an annual $23,029, which means that even if Chris was responsible with his money, didn't have an ungodly amount of debt to pay off, it didn't have a group of exploiters taking a giant chunk out of his monthly payment, his livestream money and his monthly tugboat simply wouldn't be able to cover it. And that's assuming he has no other expenses. What children also need is a good adult to properly teach them morals and facts of life. Insistent claims that he is true and honest and self-insert portrayal notwithstanding, Chris is nowhere near the man for the job. At best, he's not above lying or doing less than desirable things to get what he wants, and at worst, he has gotten himself banned from numerous places for unruly behavior. On top of that, he cultivated a persecution complex in that random people simply minding their own business conspire to torment him just for being autistic, which originated from his incompetent parents, who clearly failed to instill genuine moral values within him for 29 years. Assuming that Chris's hypothetical child inherits his condition and/or doesn't have the ability nor willingness to defy or simply leave him permanently, it's very likely he'll be a terrible role model for them, just as Bob and Barb were to him, and the cycle of toxicity would continue. Also, not to put too fine of a point on it, Chris has virtually no aptitude for self-control and anger management whatsoever. Even if you were to argue that past conflicts have proven that he is way too passive to assault someone physically, he'll just as easily settle for verbal outbursts and exaggerated temper tantrums in general, which can similarly cause trauma. As documented, Chris did have a tendency to lose his temper towards young kids during the time he went to the game place on weekends, which, among other bad habits, eventually led to the manager banning him permanently. Top that off with Chris being a self-righteous egotist virtually unable to feel remorse or empathy, the end result could at best be a strained relationship between Chris and his children, if not them escaping and preventing further contact with him altogether, as his half-brother Cole did with Barb. And finally, while in the past it could be considered speculation or something an A-log would say, even regarding some worrying comments on Facebook, nowadays it's obvious that Chris is okay with questionably consensual incest, especially parental incest between a mother and her child. Regarding his previous comments on Facebook regarding incest with one's own child, he was not only accepting over the fact, but actually encouraged it, claiming that it was a good experience for the child, only adding the condition that the sexual relationship should not be abusive or hurtful, completely disregarding that not only is sex with a child by definition abusive, and by extension hurtful, because children are not able to consent to sex. In short, if by some miracle Chris was actually capable of conceiving children and somehow being allowed to keep them, they would grow up sick, hungry, penniless, neglected, abused, and/or dead. Yeah, I would say they really hit the nail on the head. But we're not done here. Let's move on to the next page, being Crystal Weston Chandler's sister. Crystal Weston Chandler is the fictional twin sister of Christian Weston Chandler. Her role in his fantasy world stems from his long-held desire to have a sibling to play with, along with some classic narcissistic pleasure and gender identity issues with seeing himself as an attractive female. Crystal represents one of the more embarrassing facets of Chris's mind, since his notions of the perfect girlfriend, the perfect sister, the perfect daughter, and the perfect female self so easily intersect, it's not hard to arrive at a conclusion involving incest. Well, fancy seeing you in the flesh, Christopher, my brother. Ugh, sounds like a line from a seedy porno. Origins. He appears to have first created the character in 2004 as Crystal the female twin for a set of custom Yu-Gi-Oh cards, although another one of those cards depicts Crystal as girlfriend's gift. In fiction, Crystal wears a Rose-Chu medallion correlating to Chris's Sonichu medallion and Reldnak's Black Sonichu medallion. This is inconsistent, or is it, with Chris's usual theme of Sonichu, Rose-Chu, and Blake representing the hero, lover, and villain. In real life, Chris created the Rose-Chu medallion for his future girlfriend, which raises the question of how he expected to adapt this into the comics when his sister was running around wearing the same bauble as his fiancée. Crystal's origin is depicted in sub-episode 5, where she is made manifest by Chris employing his ancient powers and Heart Torch of Fail split into two nearly identical beings. Chris and Crystal wear the same outfits and even have the same superpowers, although she lacks her brother's heterochromia. Throughout her appearance in the comics, characters are constantly noting how attractive she, and by extension Chris, is. A possible early appearance is in the Mario Kart 64 LEGO Raceway 1998, where Christian's cart passes something labeled Crystal. The video quality is too low to see anything, and Chris shouts hi at it/her. Incest. In 2007, Chris attempted to shock Encyclopedia Germanica into submission by posting his own Rule 34 drawings, including one of himself finger-banging a nude brunette woman. ED users immediately concluded this was Crystal, due to the two characters' extremely similar appearance, a charge which infuriated Chris and therefore became the conventional wisdom. By the time Chris successfully convinced anyone that it was really Megan Schroeder in the drawing, the notion that Chris wants to bang his imaginary twin sister had already stuck, and, as this article demonstrates, would have arisen anyway. Nonetheless, Megan stopped being friends with him because of the whole business, so Chris lost on both counts. The theme of incestuous narcissism is also prevalent in the literature of the Romantic period, particularly that of Lord Byron, who apparently acted on Chris's fantasy. The theory is that the man in question is so much in love with himself that the only other person he could ever truly love is his double. Furthermore, with the romantic emphasis on sympathy through shared experience, great nostalgia for childhood, and desire to be understood, though complete disinterest in understanding, make a sibling an ideal sexual partner for the narcissist. Most of the romantics saw the problem with this, and contented themselves with childhood friends. But then, Chris was never as smart as Wordsworth. In the comic, Crystal was first introduced in Sonichu number 3, sub-episode 4, where she appeared to aid Chris during a battle with the WM Manijerk in the Malwart region. Why is that so hard for me to say? Malwart, Malwart, Malwart. God, I hate it. Beaten and nearly subdued, Chris had a vision of his Cherokian ancestor. He revealed to Chris that his Heart Torch is able to summon his dream sibling. Crystal had also helped Chris battle Baggett and the Changebot Cractor in the Guitar region, as well as Mary Lee Walsh at the PVCC. Crystal was trapped in the Dark Mirror Hole by Mary Lee Walsh and Count Graduan in Sonichu number 5. In an attempt to save Chris and Sailor Megtoon from falling victim to the mirror, she pushed them both out of the way, becoming captive in the mirror herself. After her capture, a few token mentions have been made of her plight. At one point, it was said that gathering 7 Sonichu balls would allow Crystal to escape the mirror, but for the most part she was largely forgotten, especially while Christian himself was stuck in the practically identical time void. Since Chris had been keen on ejecting everyone he created from his sweetheart search misadventures, the final fate of Crystal Weston Chandler seemed quite grim. Then, partway through Sonichu number 10, Chris suddenly turned into Colossal Chan and rescued her simply by walking in, scooping her up in his arms, and walking out of the mirror in the most anticlimactic way. Chris originally planned that he would hand over mayoral power to his sister at the end of the issue, but for some reason decided not to. Being Chris's twin, Crystal's powers are very similar to his. She can transform into a Rose-Chu called Crystalina Rose-Chu. When she and Chris Chan Sonichu join together, they are able to form Chris Chan Pure and execute a powerful ultimate attack known as Chris Chan Pure Pulse Jolt Lance. God, try saying that 5 times fast. Her personality is identical to every single non-evil female character in the franchise. She does nothing except stereotypically girly activities, shopping, getting high from sampling perfumes, chatting about boys, etc. And she defers to men in all things. Her fashion sense is similar to that of her twin brother. She wears the same clown shirts and has a Rose-Chu medallion. Crystal has an odd quirk where she constantly refers to Chris by his original name, Christopher, instead of Christian, the reasoning for which probably exists in Chris's head but has never been elucidated. In a Twitter post, Chris, while LARPing as Sonichu, presented Crystal's origin story. According to Chris, Crystal originated from another dimension where she took over the helm after her dimension's Chris presumably dies. During a battle with her dimension's Mary Lee Walsh, Crystal was sent through a portal into C197 after Chris used the Heart Torch of Fail to summon her. Chris stated that Crystal decided to remain in C197 after realizing that Chris was the true and honest Chris. As another display of Chris's failures in his love quest, she also appears to be one of the very few females in Sonichu who was never paired off with anyone. You guys think that's bad? Don't worry, it gets a hell of a lot worse. Let's move on to the next page. Crystal Weston Chandler, daughter. As for where I see myself, I am uncertain career-wise, but I have a dream. And that dream is to find the woman to make my sweetheart from honest, true friendship, make her my wife, and from us have a daughter named Crystal Weston Chandler. I've had a number of dreams where I take care of and tend to the needs of my baby, Crystal. And from all those dreams, I knew they were God's wishes for my future. Chris, presuming to know the wishes of God Bear. Around the age of 21, Chris had multiple dreams in which God and Jesus told him to find a sweetheart to build from the ground up to have his daughter Crystal, named after, quote, the illustrious meadow, according to him. In a custom My Little Pony trading card, Chris depicts Crystal as a pony who traveled back in time to help her father, Chris, find a boyfriend-free girl. This is completely ripped off from Chibiusa's entire premise in Sailor Moon.
Please understand, I am a 25-year-old high-functioning autistic male with a simple, peaceful dream of becoming a father of a sweet, little pretty girl who I will dub the name Crystal Weston Chandler. Crystal, a name that sounds similar to mine, but it has a nice ring to it, and it's also similar to the illustrious meadow that is mine from the Earth's ground.
Yet again, I have to wonder how Chris was able to birth something like this. Did he just come up with a character and now he's their father, or did he actually conceive this pony? I'd have to imagine the genesis is somewhere along the same lines of Sonichu, where Sonichu just happened to exist and refers to Chris as their father, but what do I know? Crystal and the Love Quest. Finding a woman who would birth Crystal has been a fairly consistent justification for Chris's love quest. At times, he has seemed to be more honest in wanting a girlfriend so he can get laid or prove he's straight. For example, when Julie expressed a desire to have a child, possibly with Chris, he was ambivalent and seemed more interested in a threesome between Panda, Julie, and himself. Yet with new heartthrob Ivy, his fantasy of making a family was strong, and Chris was upset when Ivy said she didn't like the name Crystal and demanded a say in their daughter's name. Likewise, in a dialogue with potential sweetheart Casey's dad, Chris revealed that he had a prophetic dream about Crystal when he was between the ages of 7 and 9. He reiterated this later in the conversation, saying he was, quote, definitely in elementary school when he dreamed about giving birth to a daughter. In the dream, he had an office job, which also won't happen. Give birth slipped out, as in Chris would like to gestate a human female infant within his body, or perhaps in a box, and somehow deliver her into the world. While it's most likely that Chris just fucked up while talking due to stress and autism, this could also be a Freudian slip suggesting that Chris has some gender identity issues, which typically begin in childhood. It's also somewhat possible that he doesn't know that the mother is the only one who gives birth, seeing how he uses it in other contexts. After Casey, Jackie was next in line as the vessel for which Chris's gift from God was to be bestowed. Crystal was featured in Lego form in the Playing House video. Despite only being in preschool, she's advanced enough to keep a diary and look after her baby brother Reginald.
So anyway, we just finished up there. That was delicious, dear. But thank you. It was a specialty I have learned from the food channel. New recipe: chicken calzone and mashed potatoes and green beans. No, it was very good. Too bad little Reginald ended up growing up at some places. Daddy, can I go in my room now? Go write my diary and then I'm going to be ready for bed soon. Okay, sweetheart. Okay, Crystal. You go take care of yourself. Thank you, Daddy.
The influence of the Idea Guys. In December 2017, Chris was brainwashed by the Idea Guys over how Crystal would be born. Role-playing as Patti Chan to Chris, an Idea Guy explained that the male Sonichu would become pregnant with Crystal after being impregnated by Chris through butt sex, and that by drawing it happening, Chris wouldn't have to do nasty anal himself. Chris actually believed this and produced the drawing to appease them, even though his comic book counterpart allegedly does not have a penis post-transition. Suffice to say, nothing ever came of this. Chris lost Crystal, an undated leaked video from the Idea Guys saga, although it's mostly due to the influence of the Teen Troon Squad, shows Chris yelling at a toilet, demanding to know what happened to his baby. No context has been given for the video, aside from the associated text provided by the squad confirming that Crystal was the baby that Chris was screaming about, and not Reginald. However, it's possible that the drawn incident with Chris raw-dogging Sonichu may have resulted in Crystal existing, at least in his mind, before disappearing from this world. Crystal apparently wrote a future message delivered by her brother Reginald, actually a troll playing along with Chris's delusions. The message itself describes Chris's goals of becoming a parent, and warns people to make adjustments to their lives ahead of the coming dimensional merge.
Hey, you toilet!
What happened to my baby?
Like with much of the Idea Guys lore, Chris maintained belief in the crystal birth prophecy long after their ousting. In November 2019, he mentioned it on Twitter. It has been written that the father to me becoming the mother of the future crystal Weston Chandler Sonichu is none other than Sonichu Prime himself, my son. I am not dumb, stupid, or blind to see what is false from others. My abilities and mentality have improved greatly over the past months and years. Name. Her name is identical to that of Chris's sister from the comics, leading to some confusion. It is unclear which spelling he was projecting for his future daughter, although he used Crystal in a Facebook message in the infamous Story of My Current Days. In the comics, he spells his stupid fake sister's name Crystal consistently, although somebody called Crystle appears in the Mario Kart 64 Lego Raceway. In a 2019 survey, he referred to Crystal as Crystal Weston Chandler Rosechew. And what do you know, that's the end of that page. But let's keep moving. Next one up, Patti Chan. Patti Chan is a fictional character based on Chris's beloved dog Patti, who died in 2006. The lead story of Sonichu 6 was a tribute to Patti. Allowed no rest even in death, the poor creature has been reborn as an anthropomorphic dog woman, and now wanders the city of Quickville. The development of the character is indicative of Chris's immature reaction to death. You know, I've never given it much thought, but it is kind of strange that he resurrected his dead dog as a comic book character. I guess in some ways you could see it as coping, but it is kind of ghoulish. Fictional character biography. A Beagle Spitz mix, Patti was born on St. Patrick's Day 1988 and was Chris's faithful dog for the next 18 years. By June 2006, Patti was not as energetic as she had once been, and her ass itched. One night, while howling at the fucking moon, Patti was distracted by a bright star, and considered her desire to walk upright and express to Chris in human language her appreciation for his companionship. Following this, Patti ate grass in the yard, unwittingly catching a 4-leaf clover in her mouth, and went to sleep. The following day, when Christian awoke Patti, she discovered that her wish had been granted, and she had been transformed into a rejuvenated, vital, humanoid creature. Later in the day, Patti expressed a desire to leave her home to roam freely. Taking into account Patti's somewhat alien nature, Chris decided to take her to Quickville via the magic portal in his bedroom, where she would be accepted as an ordinary citizen. After giving Patti a tour of his mayoral office and introducing her to Alice and Amber, Chris gave her a cell phone and a credit card to provide for her needs. Sometime later, Patti would meet the people of Quickville, most notably Rosechew. She then joined the ranks of Quickville's heroic defenders, joining Darkbind Sonichu, Magagi, and Sailor Megtoon in reinforcing Christian in the chaotic combo against Mary Lee Walsh. Following this battle, the assembled heroes convened at Chris's office, where Patti argued that Chris is sweet at heart and isn't jealous of anything. Punchy challenged the objectivity of Patti's opinion, on the grounds that Chris's dog is predisposed to see the best in him. During the quest to rescue Crystal by obtaining the 7 Sonichu balls, Patti observed that they'd obtained 4 of the balls, while 2 others were trapped with Chris in the time void, and wished for his safe return. Later, she also participated in the Sonichu 10 executions, being one of those who killed Alec. Patti would appear in Sonichu 12 attending the SLGBTQ festival, greeting Chris, who is now a tomgirl. Later on, she assists the Sonichus in battling the jerk-ops invading Quickville. Ace of Clubs. As seen in the Scrapbook of Fail near the Megan Shrine, there is a hand-drawn sketch of what appears to be Patti Chan, labeled as Ace of Clubs. It reads, "When Patti comes into contact with anything Irish or eats clovers, she morphs into the Ace of Clubs." It doesn't take rocket science to figure out that Chris stole Megan's character design, adding to the cast of stolen characters, which includes Magagi and Jigglyami. In a short story, Chris refers to Patti as the Ace of Cloves, because he's apparently too stupid to realize that the clubs in the pack of cards already look like clovers. You know, which this was a play on. Chris has an odd tendency to rename things that he steals from friends, fans, and loved ones. Whether this is because he wants to maintain some degree of originality, or if he just honestly thinks his minor changes actually improve the character isn't certain. But let's read the Ace of Cloves. The original dog, Patti, was my sweet dog who lived a long over 18 years before she was terminally ill, and I, Christian Weston Chandler, gave permission to her vet to put her to sleep. As she fell into the injection, I could hear her cry unto me, "Thank you, Christian, I love you." Her body now rests under her doghouse, next to our gazebo in our backyard. I miss her every day, but I know that she is up there, looking down upon me and my family and protecting as she had done before. Bless her lucky heart. As a folklore character, Patti Chan is a free-spirited, lucky beagle Spitz dog. She enjoys frolicking about in the fields and sniffing the four-leaf clovers and shamrocks, but when provoked, she will shoot harmful luck beams, pounce on her enemies, or leave a ferocious bite. She is quick on the draw, graceful as the best ballerina dancer, and fairly dangerous when in a bad mood. After having been captured, if the hero's health is above the midpoint, Patti Chan will create a defensive barrier, reducing the damage to between half and 75%, and with each use, increase the hero's luck. If the hero's health is below the midpoint, Patti Chan will target his/her enemy and fire a deadly luck sphere, inflicting damage equal to half of the hero's total health, plus his/her luck times 10. Having Patti Chan in your roster will not only be the best defense and offense, but also the best friend and good luck charm you'll ever have. Wow, that was incredibly stupid, but I suppose that comes with the territory. Anyway, let's keep going. Next page is imaginary friends. He sees them with his third eye, but longs to see them in real life. An idea guy on Chris's perception on his imaginary friends. Imaginary friends are psychological manifestations typically employed by toddlers to practice social skills. Most children grow out of the phase. Chris, on the other hand, retained his belief in imaginary friends well into adulthood, still holding the belief at 43 years of age. Chris has always had difficulties distinguishing fiction from reality due to his autism. His imaginary friends were originally an occasional source of companionship, as well as a coping mechanism for moments of stress, such as the infamous example of invoking Sonichu to marry Lee Walsh during his college days. As he entered his mid-30s, Chris retreated more often into his imaginary world as a reaction to the downward spiral of his life, ignoring the real-world problems of his debt and lack of independent living experience, resulting in a vicious feedback loop in which Chris's real-world problems worsen while his devotion to his imaginary friends increases. The machinations of the idea guys and the enablers that followed, whose chief tactic is role-playing as Chris's imaginary friends, further cemented the belief into Chris's mind. Chris's devotion to his imaginary friends outweighed his real-life friendships with his Pokemon League friends, and he gradually lost contact with the latter to focus on his fantasy world. How Chris interacts with imaginary friends. Chris is confused over the concept of imagination, interpreting it as visions into the dimension where his friends reside. In a 2010 email to Jackie, Chris said that he communicated with imaginary friends before falling asleep, essentially describing a form of daydreaming. I do still sometimes talk with my electric hedgehog Pokemon while I'm on my way to falling asleep and the TV is off. We talk about current things, like things I could do or say in meeting new people, or just things I'm feeling currently to get their response to. Chris, Jackie email 16. Chris tapped into New Age spirituality to try strengthening his perceived ties with the other dimension, with techniques centering around meditation. In summer 2017, he began referring to a third eye, a concept associated with mental visions and precognition. He also experimented with astral projection, a term for an out-of-body experience achieved with meditation, as a method to access Quickville, and later dimension C197. In fall 2017, the first idea guys entered the picture, role-playing as Chris's own imaginary friends, initially to see if he was gullible enough to believe it. From Chris's perspective, he thought that he was addressing his friends over the internet instead of having to astral project. This validated Chris's beliefs, and his faith in imaginary friends consequently escalated to the forefront of his life. I pretended to be both Sonichu and Rosechu, who borrowed my computer. All it took was a little knowledge on Sonichu, and Chris believes he's talking to his children, the ringleader of the idea guys. This comic page is supposed to illustrate Chris opening his third eye, but I don't know, I'm not really convinced. After the idea guys were ousted due to their influence to extort Chris, various enablers crawled out of the woodwork and copied their techniques, keeping Chris firmly rooted in his fantasy land. Chris is trying to physically interact with fictional characters. During BronyCon 2017, an inconspicuous observer recorded him dancing with Patti Chan, in reality having Thin Air as his dance partner. In January 2019, Chris claimed on Twitter to have been attacked by an imaginary enemy while in the shower, and that he, quote, was able to whack the attacker with a half-full conditioner bottle. In April 2019, Chris was spotted by a fan at Target muttering really loudly. From Chris's perspective, he had been hanging out with his imaginary friends. Chris also believes in spirit possession involving his imaginary friends, such as when he believed Hyperdimension Neptunia character Uzumi and his OC Patti Chan had possessed his body. Accounts of manifestations. Sonichu. During a 2004 confrontation with Mary Lee Walsh, Chris began to converse with Thin Air, pretending that Sonichu was in the office with him. Chris then pretended to be Sonichu, giving a speech that he claimed Sonichu wanted to give to Walsh, before ending the lecture with a Kamehameha, since he believes that he has magic powers. Unsurprisingly, Mary ordered him to see a psychiatrist. Chris has also conversed with Sonichu and Rosechu before falling asleep. At one point, he claimed that the pair offered him relationship advice. Magagi la skunk. skunk. He claimed to have conversed with Magangi la skunk, particularly regarding how she has allegedly told him that she, Megan, but by extension Magangi, should never have been born. Nightstar. Chris believes that he has overheard conversations held by Nightstar and other random My Little Pony characters. In 2017, Chris has also used his Nightstar account on Twitter to talk to himself, even after revealing that Nightstar was a sock puppet of his. Patti Chan. The prime member of Chris's imaginary friends, having surpassed Sonichu and Nightstar in importance to Chris, as Patti Chan's abilities center around psychic powers, which Chris deems useful in his misguided attempts to correct his real-world problems. Patti Chan's rise in status began around summer 2017, when Chris believed Patti Chan was with him at BronyCon, to the point that he danced with thin air at the BronyCon gala, believing that his partner was Patti Chan. Patti Chan's importance to Chris has made him a key for others to use in manipulating him. The Idea Guys duped Chris into believing he was married to Patti Chan. The captain invoked Patti Chan to convince Chris to trust him to stop the Idea Guys. Jacob Sockness deceived Chris with a fake chat log involving Patti Chan. And various enablers have used Patti Chan to get their foot in the door with Chris. Trying to meet Neptune at GameStop. An Idea Guide told Chris that fictional Hyperdimension Neptunia character Neptune would be waiting for him at a GameStop during December 2017. Chris opted to go to the Forest Lakes location from which he had been banned, and on his own initiative stood outside and thoroughly scanned the interior looking for Neptune, then followed up by honking on his horn and shouting her name. Polyamorous marriage. During January 2018, the Idea Guys rewrote Sonichu lore so that Patti Chan and his father figure, Mewtwo, were married. 2 months later, they convinced Chris that he was married to Patti Chan and their OC, Krizzle, in a bisexual polyamorous marriage. The notion stuck with Chris, who declared his real-life love quest to be over. In June, long after the Idea Guys were ousted, Chris widened the marriage to officially include Mewtwo and Sylvana, Patti Chan's other partner. Chris has frequently mentioned his imaginary husbands and wives on social media by posting messages written from their point of view, having Patti Chan deliver the news that Chris went to the hospital, claiming to be with them, stating that Sylvana helped him diagnose a problem with his car, or referring to them as if they were real, saying his hubby too Mewtwo helped him out of the events of the Detective Pikachu movie. Religious figures. Chris has long believed that religious and spiritual figures like God and the Grim Reaper give him messages in the form of dreams, not realizing that dreams are merely expressions of his own subconscious desires. During the Idea Guy saga, an Idea Guy roleplayed as Jesus to troll Chris, as seen in the Krizzle torture chat log, validating Chris's egocentric beliefs that religious figures would seek to contact him. During the subsequent Dimensional Merge saga, Chris took his beliefs to the next level, believing that various deities were his imaginary friends helping the merge. The CPUs whom I am friends with, as well as God/Emmanuel and Jesus of this dimension. Chris, December 2018. Distress over fictional characters. Chris uses his imaginary friends to find solidarity with changes to fictional media that he dislikes. The initial design of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie was disliked by Chris, who claimed to have discussed the matter with Sonic, whose opinion was that the movie does no good justice for him. When long-running cartoon My Little Pony Friendship is Magic wrapped up production, Chris was upset and trying to convince Hasbro to continue the show, claiming to have consulted with Princess Celestia, a character from the cartoon. Coping with people who distance themselves. Chris has used the concept of his imaginary friends to cope with people who explicitly don't want to put up with him. In January 2019, several members of the Brony community blocked Chris's Twitter en masse. Chris tried to cope by role-playing an apology between his alter ego and the alter egos of the Bronies, in which the latter apologizes to Chris for blocking him, and then proceeded to take the roleplay seriously, sending the apology drawings out in a failed attempt to convince the Bronies to unblock him. In December 2019, Chris threw a tantrum over artist Project SNT's redesign of his Wild Sonichu character, later rationalizing his reaction as the result of Dimension CS89 calling him for help. Chris tried to get Project SNT to respond to his power fantasy, but she refused to act as an enabler and ignored him. Since she didn't want to interact with him, Chris appropriated her as an imaginary friend, declaring that she had been force transported to Dimension CS89 to assist him with battling interdimensional evil there. Miscellaneous coping mechanisms. In June 2021, when Chris was about to leave the Watchmen Discord server The Place, and by extension cut ties with Megan, he stated to Null that he had to, quote, confirm Night V's safety and being from Megan, but I'm certain Knights and Rila have his back during uncertain moments, referring to an OC by Megan based on the character Knights from the Nights into Dreams video game. Robert Chu. Initially, in the years after Chris's father passed away, Chris was in mourning over the loss, accepting that Bob was gone. However, the Idea Guys manipulated Chris into believing that Bob was alive in Quickville's dimension, reincarnated as a Sonichu and going by the name Robert Chu. Chris tried to drag his mother into the fantasy of Bob being alive, having her pose for a photo next to a drawing of Robert Chu for a Twilight Sparkle secret shipfic folder card. In the card text, Chris claimed, every once in a while, Mr. C runs back home to offer comfort to Barbara. saga. Before the dimension merge's completion, she has missed him every day and found the solace and comfort when he comes by. He continues to carry a torch for her in his heart and soul while he helps protect everyone in Quickville and at this old temple of a house. On video, Chris has interacted with his imaginary friends on video. During the summer 2017 BronyCon, Chris was observed dancing with Patti Chan. In the fall and winter 2018 video, Chris with Teen Troon Squad, while hanging out at a squad member's home, Chris fondles and kisses thin air, believing it is his imaginary wife, Crizzle. In the June 2019 video, Believe in the OCs and Deities, while rambling about the impending dimensional merge, Chris gestures at thin air and states that Patti Chan is sitting next to him. While pretending to be Sonichu, Chris signaled that Rosechu is sitting right next to him as he stated his will on camera. In the February 2021 video, Chris kisses Rosechu, filmed by Preeter. Chris, in his phase of role-playing as Sonichu, kisses an imaginary Rosechu. Boy oh boy, that was quite a doozy of a page, but we're still not done. Let's do one more, this time being polyamorous marriage. Awesome romps in the hay with Patti Chan as well as Crizzle. Chris. The polyamorous marriage is an escapist fantasy and maladaptive coping mechanism brainwashed into Chris by the idea guys. Since March 2018, Chris was led to believe he is in a bisexual marriage with fictional OCs. Patti Chan and Crizzle Rosechu tied the knot with Chris in March, with Sylvana and Mewtwo officially joining in later. In other words, the real sweethearts were the ones he made up along the way, alongside a copyrighted Nintendo character. Arguably, this is one of Chris's most bizarre collection of sweethearts to date. Formerly, Chris only desired real-world relationships. In the mailbag 32 7 years prior, when a fan suggested real dolls for companionship, Chris angrily replied that he would, quote, never ever settle for such a pretend relationship. His change of heart into accepting his imaginary friends for relationships may have been influenced by subconsciously understanding that he is unlikely to find a real romantic partner at this stage in his life, and with all of his baggage being public knowledge. On the bright side, his love quest appeared to be finally over. As a coping mechanism, the imaginary marriage eventually failed to keep Chris satisfied. By early 2021, Chris was lamenting his loneliness and expressing a desire for real-world relationships. This can be seen in the Lonely Feelings chat from March, where in a rare moment of self-awareness, he acknowledged his imaginary friends cannot assuage his loneliness, as they are not truly with him. With his fantasies and reality both leaving him without a satisfying end to the love quest, Chris ultimately resorted to an incestuous affair with his own mother. And here's a list of all the people that were involved in the relationship. Gotta love it. Biography. Early days. I got married to Patti Chan, Sonichu, and Crizzle Rosechu last March, and then I married Sylvana Rosechu and Mewtwo last June. We all share a polyamorous relationship. Chris explains his current relationships. From at least November 2017, the idea guys have had a significant influence on both Chris's real life and his Sonichu canon. By far, one of the greatest influences they had on Chris's real life was the relationships with his characters. Most of what we understand about these relationships stems from Chris's various texts and drawings. The seeds for Chris's marriage were originally sown when Chris announced in January 2018 that Patti Chan, previously known to be in a relationship with Sylvana, was now married to his mentor Mewtwo. The Chris Patti Chan Crizzle polyamorous relationship or marriage began on the 26th of March 2018 when Chris announced that his sweetheart search was over, yet again. He later mentioned that the supposed relationship involves 3 people. From the wording, it is himself and 2 others, implying that he was in a polyamorous relationship at the time. Their identities were not known at the time, and because he claimed they all knew each other in person, people assumed that Chris was in a relationship with 2 actual people. He later said that one of them, Patti Chan, was his loving boyfriend, with the implication that the other, Crizzle, was a woman. On the 10th of April 2018, Chris came out as bisexual, apparently after a discussion with them. Days later, he uploaded a disturbing video, Dick Licker That Is I, in which he licked an image of Patti Chan's penis drawn on a wall. He also updated his Facebook to note that he is a bisexual trans woman, quote, interested in men and women. He affirmed that he gave oral sex to Patti Chan to a Twitter ween. Apparently, Chris's relationship is not merely polyamorous but open, as he claims they have no objection to his return to prostitution. They also seem to be okay with Chris's Facebook and Twitter avatar being fan art from a member of the Quick Protect Squad depicting him being kissed by a female fan, as well as Chris hitting on Brian Frogboy. Reveal. On the 30th of April 2018, Chris introduced his fan base to Crizzle Rosechu, calling her, quote, a very close gal, and that he promised her he would make an amiibo figure of her. He then liked a comment from a fan who congratulated him on revealing one of his significant others. In Beady Beady Beady, I'm Back Buck, he implied that Patti Chan was the other lover. On May 5th, he released a preview of a specific mini-comic to be included in Sonichu number 13. It depicts him, Patti Chan, and Crystal Rose Chu getting married. The comic is dated the 26th of March, the same date as when Chris announced his sweetheart search to be over. When questioned by a fan about the relationship, considering Patti Chan was married again, Chris replied, quote, "Polyamorous relationships and marriages are very cool there. Sylvana, yes, her name is spelled with a Y, is totally cool with Crizzle and I being part of the wedding tree. Mewtwo was skeptical at first, but he came around, and he really likes me too. And you know Mewtwo, he has a good heart, but cross him and you will regret it like Team Rocket did." By late May, the sweetheart's troll status had become obvious, and several pieces of evidence linked them and Chris's really bizarre content to the idea guy, who was thought to have stopped involvement with Chris after being doxxed in January. However, Chris made 2 tweets on the 25th of May acknowledging and calling out the idea guy, yet still referred to Crizzle and Patti Chan as his sweethearts, and restated his bisexuality in the Kopits interview the next day. At some point in June, Sylvana, Rose Chu, and Mewtwo were added to the marriage. It is worth noting that Chris rejected a potential sweetheart in favor of his fictional characters, suggesting that he is happy with his current relationships. Married life. Chris described his marriage in some depth in the Count Dankula interview of June 2018. Quote, "I was destined for this relationship. That's why my past relationships, real and fictional, with the theoretical exes that were trolls and bullies that pretend to be women, that's why they all failed." Excerpt from the Count Dankula interview. 3rd of August 2018. Patti Chan persuaded Chris to publicly expose the idea guys by chronicling his experiences for future generations. The result was The Awakening of a CPU, a short story. 26th of February 2019. Following the release of the Pokemon Detective Pikachu second trailer, Chris remarked that his husband Mewtwo was indeed involved in the production of the film. Also, I did see the new #Detective Pikachu movie trailer. My hubby too actually did help out during those events, though the surging through the parade balloon, in his own words, was exaggerated a bit. 11th of March 2019. Chris gave the unfortunate news that Mewtwo was struck ill, but was on his way to recovering. Despite being a longtime Pokemon fan, he somehow failed to remember the instant convenience of Pokemon centers. "Hey, I've just got this news from Patti Chan. Our hubby, Mewtwo, has come down with a really bad head virus. He is resting at the Quickville Basilicom, and he should only be a few days until recovered. Prayers would be appreciated very kindly and much, please. Thank you." In a letter he had sent to Helena Fiorenza on the 8th of May 2022, Chris states that he considers her OC Pikachu as part of his harem, although he has seemingly dropped it later on. He has also started to sometimes omit Crizzle's name, but as shown a few times, notably in the Persona 5 livestream, he does still consider her his spouse. But what do you know, that's the end of that page, and therefore is the end of the video. I hope you guys have learned some new things about the internet's least favorite autistic. I feel like I've got 1 or 2 new creases in the brain. It's unfortunate they weren't made with more pertinent information. But I digress. Like I said, that's going to be it for today's video. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've also got a Newgrounds account if art stuff is your thing. I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.